Good afternoon, disaster and emergency management leaders, search and rescue volunteers, and first responders, and anybody else that is joining us this afternoon, this morning, if you're in Pacific time. So today, hi, Catherine. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you coming on. So today we are here to talk to Shanyn Silinski. She's a program manager for Search and Rescue Autism Project with Autism Canada. Shannon's responsible for the development and deployment of the education resources and accompanying training. So welcome, Shannon, to the program. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me today.
Awesome. So if you're out there listening, just hit the like button. You can submit any questions down below in the profile. We'll get to them a little bit later. But first, I wanted to start off and kind of just get a history on where the program originated from, how it came to be, and just give us some of that background.
It's a really great program. I was brought on board in 2018. The team at Autism Canada had applied for a Search and Rescue New Initiatives Fund grant, and it was around preventing becoming lost due to wandering and bolting, which is a common activity that happens to autistics of all ages. And when they brought me on board, it was because of my emergency services background. So the first thing I did is I went to my community and I said, what do you want to see? And after a lot of discussions and bouncing things back and forth, the consensus was they needed technical training and they also needed really robust prevention tools. So that's the direction that we took with the project. So we've created prevention tools. And because our federal partner on the grant is Parks Canada, we were able to do some outdoor activities, social stories, and different prevention tools for the community, but also really dive into that technical training for the response community.
Okay, so this is in partnership with Parks Canada through the SARA grant. And when did everything start rolling? How long ago was that?
September 2018 is when things got rolling. If you've ever done a grant, you know that you get the yes and then you get the go ahead and they're not at the same time.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So we've been working really hard. We've got our launch and learn coming up in October because we have our training suite developed. We have our modules out there and we've actually been doing some training. So it's getting some momentum and it's just really exciting to be getting out there to folks with this.
Yeah, this is reminiscent of when I used to be a search and rescue volunteer for Edmonton Regional Search and Rescue right around when the Adventure Smart program started to take off and SAR teams across Canada were delivering Adventure Smart. So this kind of reminds me of that same type of initiative.
And Adventure Smart is a great program.
Yeah.
And it really highlighted for us the great work that's been done, but also identified some gaps because we always do that gap and risk analysis. Where are we missing pieces? And it helped us identify some gaps for our neurodiverse and autistic community members. That's really allowed us to build some tools to fill those gaps in and address them.
Okay. So let's run through kind of some of those gaps that you found just to start us off.
A lot of it is around language and understanding. We came up with, after a lot of discussions, one of the important things to remember about our programming is that everything is scenario based. And we've talked to the responders and autistic community members themselves about their experiences, about what they've gone through becoming lost, about wandering and bolting activities. And we really tried to understand where people were at. So all of the scenarios that we trained to have actually happened. We've talked to the team members that were on those calls. We've broken them down, what worked, what didn't, what organic things did the team come up with that was really successful, and what are some things that we're just like, no, we probably don't want to do that because it didn't work. For the autistic community, there's a lot of things that are language and sensory barriers. And it's true for any neurodiversity. Most of us in emergency services are trained to that neurotypical audience where when we put on our captain voice or our training officer voice, there's a specific required response that we just assume everyone's going to have. You're not necessarily going to see that. And we want to be able to address that communication gap so that we're communicating to our autistic community members about those prevention messaging, how to have fun exploring and not become lost, what to do if you identify becoming lost, even though you don't feel lost. And also the responders, we talk a lot about the approach, about the preparation, and really understanding how to finish the search properly. It's not just when you found someone, it's actually when you've returned them fully to their family or their caregivers, because there's a lot of room for secondary incidents, and we don't want to have any of those happening on any call, whether it's emergency services for fire, a search for a search and rescue team, or any other emergency response.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I always remember the hardest part about being lost is admitting that you're lost. So it's good to hear that you're kind of diving in that for your audience. What kind of things specifically did you find that? Well, let's start. What's the highest risk right now for autistic individuals? Like, is it they're bolting or leaving from home or from campsites, or what's the highest risk?
The highest risk is when someone has wandered or bolted away from safety or not able to return to safety on their own. A big challenge that's faced with autistics and a lot of neurodiverse folks is that they don't have that intuitive feeling necessarily of feeling lost. There's a big assumption in training circles that you're going to sense danger, that you're going to feel lost. And we realized through having conversations that that wasn't the case. So with one of our tools, the What is Lost comic, we took the feeling out of being lost and we made it some recognizable criteria. If you see these things happening, then you might be lost. You may not feel lost, but these specific criteria in your environment can tell you that you might be lost. And if you're lost, you should respond if someone calls your name. You should answer your phone because someone cares about you and doesn't want you to be lost, because lost can be unsafe. So we've tried to make sure that those messages are very positive, but also very instructive, that you don't have to rely on feeling it. And, people from the autistic community of any age can wander and become lost. They can become overwhelmed and bolt. It's not age restrictive or gender restrictive. It's very environmental. And you won't know that someone's being overwhelmed until you actually start to understand how that community lives in the environment. We have a lot of assumptions about our environments that we live in, whether, that shouldn't be overwhelming or that shouldn't be stressful, but it can be. And we have to respect that what we take for granted may actually be almost traumatically stressful to someone else, and accommodate them and have that inclusion in our training so that we're serving all of our community members.
Okay, yeah, so that's really cool. I didn't realize that you've essentially developed a self-assessment that helps individuals determine if they're lost.
Yep.
Or that's cool, because I think that really empowers people to take a little bit of control and feel safer, knowing that they've got a tool that is going to help them assess their current situation or risk level. And then they can implement some strategies at that time once they start meeting some of that criteria.
And it's, these are all learned skills. We can all learn to be safer in an outdoor environment or an urban environment. And if we're giving tools that are easily used by that community, then we've taken our emergency planning and our preparedness messaging to another level, where we've actually acknowledged that understanding and communication isn't a universally simple thing, because you've got cultural barriers, you have accessibility barriers, you have language and understanding barriers. And how do we overcome those so that our messaging is able to be used by populations that are more vulnerable than others, that tend not to navigate hazards well or have negative interactions with hazards because there's not that, ooh, that's danger. It's in the way of me achieving my goal or escaping a stressor. I'm not really recognizing the danger. How do we have people understand on our emergency services side that we make a lot of assumptions when we get into training, when we start running scenarios? On the responder side, we make a lot of assumptions about the people we're serving. We assume they're understanding. We assume that they'll respond to us in a certain way. And we have to stop doing that, because what we think of, even if we know one autistic person, we know exactly one autistic person, And if you're a teacher and you see that person at school, or they're a work colleague and you see them at work, you know one autistic in one specific environment. You don't know them every day, all day.
Right.
You don't know how they respond to the stresses of grocery shopping. You
Yeah.
don't know how well they manage their work environment and come home and are like, hey, I'm done. Like, I'm just done. I've put in all my energy today for this, and I'm just done. So we really have to take and understand that we have some understanding and connections, but also really put those aside because they can be a bit of a blinder. A lot of times we put a lot of assumptions on relationships based on our experience with one or two people. And we've done this, in our trainings. If you've gone on a search for a hunter, lost person behavior tells us hunters tend to follow certain patterns. Statistically, they'll do certain things and they'll have a certain attitude. Autistics fall into the hardest to search for category, which is mobile and unresponsive. There's not a lot of predictability except for the fact it's going to be entirely unpredictable. And we have talked to Bob Koister, who wrote the program, and we've discussed, those mobile and unresponsive groups such as Alzheimer's and dementia and other neurodiversities. How do we search for them successfully? And how do we build prevention tools that keep them from becoming lost? And there's really, within our technical training, we dive down really deep into a lot of specifics to help be successful for our emergency responders in creating safe systems, but also successful responses.
Gotcha. And and it reminds me, I remember the city of Edmonton. I don't know if they came up with this themselves or if they adopted it from other programs, but I remember in their public recreation centers, in the pools, they started educating people on what deep water is. Because deep water is not the same for you or I, but deep water is kind of where you get up to about here. And I really like the fact that they were empowering people to determine for themselves how to measure what deep water is, so they didn't go in it. And so your program is specifically to provide this training. So how long is the training?
We have a number of training modules because, like anything else, you start in one place. And search and rescue is a great place to start because we all come from somewhere else. You came to your search and rescue team from your day job and from your hobbies and your lived experiences. So it's a great place to start from. And out of building those search and rescue trainings, we also expanded into other module-based and level-based trainings for emergency response. We went into recognizing behaviors, sensory supports, which are applicable to corporations, security services, paramedic service, dispatch. So our training is broken down into 2-hour components for virtual. I mean, COVID right now kind of limits the amount of time you can ask someone to be on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
It's not an ideal training environment, but 2 hours is, and we can break it out over 2 days if a team needed it. But except for our introduction to our programming, which is an hour long, all of our other training modules are around that 2-hour mark.
Okay.
Give or take with, interactions and questions and things, they can go a little bit longer.
And how many modules are there in total?
There's about 8 right now, including a custom option so that your organization could come to us and say, this is our community's needs. These are things that we feel are, gaps in our understanding and our training. How do we fill those? How do we address that? And we have those options to go in and, help those communities identify and then train to fill those gaps, because we want to make sure that we're building good communities and safe communities and inclusive communities. And so a part of all the trainings is building those community relationships, how to have a sensory friendly open house, how to be inclusive and invite your community members in to get to know you on the job, to get to know the equipment you use and why the rules that you have are important, and how they might have to be modified in training for your teams for them to be accessible and inclusive. So we really try to be as robust as we can in covering different things without it feeling overwhelming. And again, that's why we broke it into 2-hour components. The only ones that we're still waiting on a post-COVID world for would be our Train the Trainer program, which is a more intense in-person training. And then once we expand into that area of role playing and tabletop exercises, again, we either need a better virtual environment or we need to wait for some post-COVID in-person events, because those things are really better in person.
Right. And so if you're just joining us, I'm talking to Shanyn Silinski. She's the program manager for the Search and Rescue Autism Project with Autism Canada. And are you going out with search and rescue teams that are doing exercises or training in the field to conduct activities with them, or do you train them and leave it up to them to take the reins?
Well, in COVID times, with everyone trying to stay safe and healthy, and honestly, there's only one of me. So as much as I'd like to be out with our teams in person, we're relying a lot on training. And they all know that I'm available. So they can message me, they can text or call if they have a question. But we really spend a lot of time. And that's why the scenarios are so valuable, because we get their scenarios out of them. What are searches like in your area? Are you in a parks region? Are you in a prairie region? Are you urban? What do your searches look like? What does your community look like? And then we customize some of those training discussions around where they're working. Because there's not a lot of sense going into a mountain exercise with the folks from Badlands.
Right.
Or from, an urban search and rescue team who's looking at a large urban park rather than a mountain park. We need to understand where the searches are happening and what our teams are encountering. And then we just support that.
Okay.
I had someone ask me in a training, he was looking for the big piece, like where's the big new training? And what this is it plugs into what we're already doing. Right. It's ICS compatible. It's interoperable across borders. It plugs into what our team's already doing. It's just more tools. It's more things that we can use to make our searches better, our prevention activities better. And even though it is module based, it really already plugs into what a lot of these teams are doing a great job with. It's just fine tuning it and giving them that little bit of extra that you're not going to get from a tip card or an information sheet or a toolkit, because it is, as you come from the fire emergency services background. When you get into trainings, you can get into some pretty heavy stuff, but it's important to keep the people we're serving safe and important for keeping our team safe.
Well, and it's important that the people involved understand the perspective of the family and the person who's lost or missing, because I think you're right. A lot of programs fail to look at, one, evidence-based solutions or ideas, and two, they fail to take an empathic look at the person they're looking for, the family, and they make a lot of assumptions. And so I think providing that awareness to first responders, search and rescue volunteers, teachers, all those different communities of people that you mentioned, just even giving them common terminology. Like before this interview, I'd never heard of neurodiverse, and I think I called it a disorder in the start. I don't think it could, depending on where you are in the spectrum, it could be a disorder to your life, I suppose. But I'd never heard of neurodiverse family before, or neurodiverse spectrum. And so that is, I think, important to understand, that people are going to be along a spectrum. It's not one size fits all.
No, and even, sometimes it's referred to as a spiky profile, and neurodiversity really covers off anybody whose brain wiring is different from our neurotypical middle of the road. So we can cover Alzheimer's and dementia.
Okay.
Someone can have FAS or FAD. They can even have a traumatic brain injury. ADHD and autism are two of the most commonly talked about neurodiversities. Yep. But even people who are profoundly gifted and asynchronous are neurodiverse. Sure. And they all require a specific understanding of what their brain wiring is. I had a friend of mine say that autism isn't a disorder, it's a different operating system. And It's a good way to look at it, because there's co-occurring conditions that can be a disorder or can be a physical ailment. Yep. But the autism itself, you're born autistic, and it's through your entire lifespan. You don't outgrow it. It doesn't leave. It's not something to be cured, because it's not an illness, and it's not something to fix because you're not broken. You're just different. And in our
Right.
society, we had a lot of years of looking for the homogenous and pushing everyone to the middle of the bell curve for easy management. Our elementary schools are a great example of that. Everybody stand in line, everybody be quiet, everybody do all these things that make it easy for a teacher to manage a group of kids. Those kids that never could do that are actually your neurodiverse kids.
Yep.
And we just have to have a more accepting and inclusive environment, whether it's at work or school or in our emergency services, that we're addressing all of our community members and not just the ones that are most populous,
Right.
and not the ones that have less calls.
Yep.
We need to be able to look at things and really understand. And that's why sensory supports and recognizing behaviors are important components, because we really get people to understand autism from a responder perspective. How do we create this community? How do we create communication? But also from an autistic perspective of those interactions with responders. What things were misunderstood? What communication gaps did people fall into? What assumptions do you have when you get a call that changed the whole tone of the call? When you could have taken that step back and assessed it when you got on scene, you went with what the caller said, who maybe had no knowledge except what they saw, and you rolled with that to a completely wrong conclusion. We're trying to work with our responder community to take that step back,
Right.
and say, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing, or am I really seeing what's going on?
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, and Catherine was, I think you said this includes dementia within the neurodiverse spectrum. Yes. Alzheimer's, you said. Okay. Yeah, and if you've got, if you're tuned in right now, if you've got a question for Shannon, please just put it in the comments and we'll get to it. I wanted to bring up the website here. I'm going to add it in. Let's go with, we'll go with this view so you can talk us through. So this is your launch and learn that you've got coming up October 24th. And this is at saraautism.ca. Tell us a little bit about what you're going over in this session.
I'm so excited we're doing our launch and learn. As you know, after working on a project for a while, to be able to get it out there and show people what you've been doing is really exciting. So what we're doing on October 24th is we're having 2 sessions. One is around the prevention messaging, our What is Lost comic, our social stories, why that prevention conversation is important. Everyone is invited to both sessions, but session A is kind of targeted towards the community at large, families and caregivers, educators, and session B is more targeted towards our responder community, where we start talking about the training and how the training looks, how we're doing delivery, and why it's important to consider this training when you're looking at bringing your team up to speed to serve their community, and the importance of it. It is free, so we invite everyone to register. If you aren't able to make the event on that day, just let us know and we will try and get you the link when we post the videos from that day on our YouTube channel. And we also have our introductory sessions.
Okay.
And also on the website, you can download the social stories, look at the video for What is Lost, and responders are welcome to register and connect with me about trainings.
And you're also, okay, this is the What is Lost. Oh, this is part of the comic book you're talking about?
Yeah.
That is cool.
The What is Lost comic is something that came to us directly from the autism community, having those discussions around what is lost and what lost looks like, and not what lost feels like. So it's really, it's a great piece. We have a little video of it as well.
Yeah.
It was illustrated by an autistic artist. So
okay. Yeah, Rebecca Burgess.
She did a great job on that for us.
Yeah.
And she does beautiful work.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's really, it's a great way for people. Actually, if you want, you could click and play the video there.
I don't know if I'll get
you might not get the audio.
I may not get the audio off the screen. I don't know if it will or not, but we can just do a really quick.
And if people don't get the audio on it, they can always just go to the website sarautism.ca and check out the.
Yeah, so this is a quick preview.
And all of the social stories are customizable. So you can put in, if you're planning a camping trip, you can download pictures from Parks Canada of your campsite and your hiking trails. You can put names in. You can really make them a family activity around how do we go on a hike safely? What do we do around our campsite? What do we do around the campfire? Safe zones. How do we explore safely so that we can enjoy sensory exploration and not become lost?
That's really cool. And the social stories are these real? Oh, you can create your own story.
Yep, you can customize those. So we've got campground safety, staying someplace new, hiking, and there's 6 right now. We're developing a number of others.
Yeah.
So the library is going to continually grow.
That's really cool. I love that idea. As using these create a story to help prepare your child for a given situation. That is
and
awesome.
It's a great way for the whole family or the group. If you're going out with your camp group or a social group, it's a great way to have conversations around how are we going to have a great time and still be safe.
Yeah.
What do we do if someone, how quickly do we call for help if someone is not with us as our group, if they've wandered away or something's happened and they've bolted? When do we call for help? What do we tell dispatch? What kind of questions should the dispatcher be asking? And what kind of information do you need to get to a team for a successful search? We dive into all of those things during the trainings.
So this is really applicable to anybody.
Yep.
And Catherine is saying, yeah, children's perspective is different from adults. Yeah, she lost her son in a store. He said he was not lost because he knew where he was and was safe. So he knew where he was. He thought he was safe, but still didn't maybe know where his mom was. So good point.
And one of the things that we've tried to do for all ages is make the criteria of being lost, being unable to get back to where you should be, whether it's with a person or to a place.
Yep.
Because someone may not feel lost and they may know where they are at, but can they get back to safety? Can they navigate their way back to where they should be so that someone isn't worried about them or looking for them? And that's kind of the criteria we've had. Because it's very common. Yeah, I wasn't lost. What are you people doing out here? You're making a lot of noise.
Right.
What's going on? Well, we're here looking for you. Well, why would you do that? Well, you're lost.
Well, and you're looking for sponsors too, I see.
Yes, we're, to expand our training and to keep it accessible, we are looking for sponsors and partners because we'd like to be able to increase our capacity for providing different training tools.
Yeah.
And with it being a national program, because Autism Canada is a national charity, we do make everything accessible across the country. And we're trying to ensure that every SARA team can access training and that everyone can access the modules for the additional trainings.
Is the training, is there a cost to the training?
The introductory session is free.
Okay.
And if you are a search and rescue team, there is a free search and rescue training. All the other modules do have a training fee associated with them.
Okay.
But because our SAR teams in Canada are dependent on volunteers, we wanted to make sure that those teams would be able to access the basic 2-hour training. Okay. If they want to do additional modules for training officers or command staff or dive deeper into programming, then they would have to find some training budget or a sponsor for that. But the initial 2-hour SAR training is free for SAR teams.
Okay. And that's again where some of that sponsorship is going to help offset those costs. Okay.
Because we want to make sure we're supporting our volunteer community.
Yeah. So if you are, and you'll take sponsorships from individuals and organizations, I assume?
Yes, we will.
Okay, so if you're an individual or an organization looking to sponsor a great initiative, this is a great opportunity because I think the application just around Alzheimer's and dementia on its own for the population, my age, sorry, Mom, not saying you're going to have Alzheimer's or dementia, but maybe, you use a lot of sticky notes. This would be really valuable to those caregivers that have parents that are starting to show signs of dementia or Alzheimer's, just as a great way to learn about it and to prevent some really bad scenarios. So yeah.
Because we did develop it specifically around autism, as you know, we do recognize that autism and the autistic community is our primary audience.
Yep, for sure.
But also recognizing that other neurodiversities, this supports searches and supports prevention activities for them as well. It's not a silo in any way. It's very much, we started here and it can expand out to other areas. You know, a great example would be a community facility or a shopping mall or some kind of event planner. How do I make sure that my event is inclusive and accessible and supportive to all the community members who may want to enjoy it? How do I make sure that I'm keeping people safe and, you know, not jumping to conclusions, and ensuring that everyone is able to have a great time at whatever event or facility they're accessing, and just planning for the different populations that live in our communities. We really want to have people thinking outside of that, you know, center group.
Yep.
How about the rest of us that live there, and how do they interact with hazards and with things that you may take for granted?
Well, and but I like this too, because it's coming from the perspective of search and rescue, which, you know, this, like you and the others that developed this program, they have experience looking for people. And so that's embedded in with, you know, some of the evidence-based research that you've done around autism and neurodiversity, but it's also combined with, you know, expertise in searching for people. So
Yep.
I think, you know, there's a lot of programs that, you know, I'm sure that are out there that maybe educate people on Alzheimer's and dementia, but I don't know if there are many out there that would also bring in the expertise around that assessment, and just having the general overall expertise included of search and rescue and the first responder perspective.
We are the only, ours is an entirely unique program. We are the only technical training out there for search and rescue and emergency response for autism. And that's because we deliberately went to that place after talking to the responder community. They needed to have something that was trainable. They needed to have something that they could scale up or down depending on the situation. Say you have a large scale evacuation and you have to do sheltering activities. How do you plan for your autistic community members when you're setting up a shelter or you're managing an evacuation so that you don't have a secondary incident, and you're supporting them so that they stay safe through that whole process? Because one of the biggest assumptions that we can make is that if it feels safe for us, then it feels safe for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not true. What we can take for granted as a safe place, I'm away from immediate danger, I'm out of that hot zone, it still may be noisy, smelly, full of stimuli, full of confusion, and not feel safe to someone to the point where they want to escape from it. And now we have a secondary incident. Now we have a scene that's not managed well, and we haven't supported our community members. And that's why this training is so important for our responder community, is that we have the opportunity to make our responses better and our prevention messaging better for all of our community members. And that includes our autistic and neurodiverse community members.
So what is your goal with the program? Like, this program is going to be running indefinitely as long as you're receiving funding, and how, okay, you just told me before we went live, you were talking with someone in Texas. So you're starting to reach like outside of Canada with this.
We are taking this Canadian initiative and this Canadian program international. We did an introductory training with the Sheriff's Department in Texas. We've had interest from other search and rescue teams in the US and other countries, and sheltering organizations that deal with major disasters and major disaster planning. We've had conversations with them as well. My goal is to get this training to every team and every department and every organization that we can, because it's going to make our communities safer and more inclusive. And it's also going to make it better for everyone, because we'll have a better understanding both of how the response community works and how our autistic community interacts with them, and how we can be building better and safer communities together. And that's why that prevention piece is so important. And that's why we're working on emergency response, so we can message and connect with our fire community and with our extrication teams, with, everybody who's out there that is going to be interacting with an autistic community should have this training.
Yeah, and I was just, before we were talking, like you were talking about doing some exercises and tabletops. And I know you and your team came into the virtual hub last week for a tour to kind of see how you could deliver this program in that setting. And it kind of just dawned on me when you said the exercise piece, you could even take someone from that training and have them wander off out into the larger open campus. And you could have a small group have to work together to go find them based on some of the strategies that you have.
Yeah, that would be
awesome.
A great environment for a scenario-based training, because it is so, there's so much there.
There's even a boat in there. The person could take off on the boat, and there's only one boat. So what do you do then?
But I think you and I need to talk about how we can do a scenario in that environment and get people to come and check it out, because that would be really great.
Yeah. And so I think, where do people get a hold of you right now to kind of book? So first off, I just want to reiterate the Launch and Learn, and that is coming up October 24th, and you can register at sarautism.ca.
Yep, just click on that Launch and Learn button, and on the top right-hand corner is the register button.
Pretty easy to find.
Very easy.
Yep. And so what's the process to book the introduction and then the training?
You can use the contact form on the website. You can contact me at my email. You can message me on LinkedIn if you'd like, and we can exchange email addresses, and I can chat with you about what your needs are and where you're at with your training and what you'd like to be able to accomplish. And I'm available on social media as well as on LinkedIn here. So feel free to reach out by DM, tag me in a question, email, send a comment through the comment form on the website.
Okay.
Go to the Autism Canada website. All of our email addresses are there on the staff listings as well. And my email at Autism Canada is easy. It's shannon@autismcanada.org.
And that's Shannon, Shanyn.
Yep.
Yeah. And so outside of sponsorship and donations, how can people support you in getting the word out or things like that?
You know what? Just spread the word. Talk to your teams. Talk to the responders in your community. Talk to community leaders and say, hey, you know what? We have community events. We have a campus. We have, a recreation center. We should look at this training, and we should be coordinating to get that to them. And then, like the heavy urban search and rescue, the task force teams, we've connected with them based out of the Calgary team, but reaching out to the others so that we can be supporting them, because they have expanded their activities supporting sheltering outside of the heavy urban search and rescue. So again, supporting sheltering activities. Those community leaders can be connecting with us around the training. And just getting the word out, because we want to be able to reach as many people as we can and have as many conversations as we can.
Yeah, I would say even if you want, I'll send you a list of, I don't know how applicable it'll be applicable. So Alberta has a number of incident management teams that are being developed, and those would be a great place to start too in delivering this training, because I don't know if there's a statistic out like this in Alberta or other provinces with, the number of autistic people in a community or anything like that. Like, is there any understanding of which communities are at higher risk because of the demographic of autistic? Or I don't know if stat can captures any of that in censuses or not.
There are some numbers around autism diagnoses in Canada and the ratio. But the thing with autism is that it's often underdiagnosed, and the waiting list to get a diagnosis is incredibly long. So, I think the best update numbers are on the Autism Canada website. Okay. But it's safe to say that probably in your everyday, work and social life, you do have connections with people on the autism spectrum. You just may not know.
Yeah.
And, you can't make that assumption, but there are a lot of people that are, working and playing and exploring in our environments that are autistic and are neurodiverse. And
Yeah.
sadly, we don't really know until they get into trouble.
Right.
And then we need to be prepared to support them as best we can. And again, that's why we're giving ownership of the prevention materials to that community, so that they can be saying, yeah, we're going to try to keep ourselves safe. We're open to having conversations with our responder community and building better relationships, so that that is a safe person to go to. That is a safe place to go to if you're feeling uncomfortable or you need support or help, that's a place that you can go, because they're going to be understanding and accepting.
So you really need to get the train the trainer going,
I
because
do. I would
you,
like to
yeah,
have regional trainers and be able to keep them updated, or multiple regional trainers, really, so that we can have leadership in our different regions that are able to take the lead on that and support their local communities and community members.
yeah, because I think I get the sense that with this program, once it starts to pick up a recognition and speed, you're going to get all sorts of requests from probably people you didn't even think of,
Yep.
and groups you haven't even thought of yet, just because it's so applicable to them. Like, again, like you're saying, like all the non-government, I'm thinking like Samaritan's Purse, Salvation Army, Red Cross, groups like that are in that, like Catherine is saying, within the FCSS world, or
Yep.
disaster services world, who work with, evacuees and disaster survivors at welcome centers and registration centers
And
that
even
need
in
to
the
have some
education
awareness.
system,
The education, yeah, totally.
it's someone can be, and we have a volunteer whose child, she's from emergency services background. He knows everything about fire drills. He knows all of the materials. He can run almost any fire extinguisher on the right kind of fire. When the school has a fire drill, it's so overwhelming that he shuts down, and he needs support to get through that school fire drill through no fault of his own, except that it's so sensory overwhelming that everything he does know gets put aside because he's overwhelmed by the announcement and the bells and the rush to line up and get out the door. We need to be able to understand how to support those students even during a drill, so that we don't have, a bolting incident, someone trying to hide in case of a real danger, that we're not putting responders at risk for a community member that we haven't served properly in the preparation.
Yeah, you're going to need like a couple hundred trainers across at least Canada to at least get someone placed in, within one region, because provinces and territories, like they could easily have 8 to 12 to 14 regions each. And so, yeah, you're going to need a lot of people. So if you're a search and rescue volunteer looking for a new opportunity to get out in your community, contact Shannon. We have to try and figure some way to get the Train the Trainer program going in a COVID-19 world. So I think, we're going to post Shannon and I are going to talk about doing some introductory presentations in the virtual hub. So if you're interested in gaining access to the virtual hub and taking a course or a presentation in there, just let myself or Shannon know, and we can get you on a list, and we could start an email list. But the more people we can kind of get this rolled out to, the better. And then you can start developing that cohort of trainers, and hopefully, yeah, figure some way. How long is the Train the Trainer? Is it days?
It's, if in a non-COVID world, it would be a 2-day training.
Okay.
But we would obviously have to spread that out over a number of days, because in a virtual world, we're not going to be able to sit around and work on things.
Do they need to take the first like the first set of modules first, then become a Train the Trainer? Or can you just, so you've got to go through the course first?
What I basically do is I run the Train the Trainer candidates through all of the training materials,
Okay.
and then I teach them how to teach it.
Okay.
I tell them what modifications it's much like the training program for Adventure Smart.
Okay.
You get trained to the core program, and then you learn the modifications for your region that you can, address and customize. So if you're in a mountain parks region or a prairies region, or, we try to make sure that those trainers are actually able to deliver appropriate programming to their regions.
Right.
But that's why it's so long, because you have to do all of the training modules, and then you have to learn how to teach it. So we go through how to deliver that. And we're going to have to learn how to deliver it dually, both in person and in a virtual environment of some sort. And maybe one day you and I can set up a virtual meet and greet in, the environment. We can have people come and we can just have some conversations around what would work for their communities, and get to meet some of those team leaders that would be interested in having further conversations. And we can just kind of get in that environment and talk about things.
100%. So what, I don't know, what is the cost? Like if I were to go and I front to end on the just the first 8 modules, like is it per individual or is it per organization?
It's per individual.
Okay.
And it really depends. Some of the pricing depends on if we're doing any customization.
Okay.
If you're just doing a straight out of the box module, it's one price per person. If we're doing customization or we're working with, multiple delivery dates and things like that, then there'll be some just extra logistical costs on top of that.
Right.
But I really try to do individual quotes and discussions around that for teams, because it is there's a lot of information. We really have to go through all the pieces to see what's a good fit for them.
Right.
But a great place to start is the introduction. And another great place to start is just connecting with me and telling me about your community and what you might be looking at and what you need. And we'll see if we can make sure that it fits in with your learning program and your Con Ed hours.
Okay. And so does this, when you say continuing education, does this training fit into like, so for example, International Association of Emergency Managers, they require members to take 100 hours of training. I would imagine that this course would fit in those hours. I don't know for sure, but
we fit a number of the criteria for Con Ed. Again, as you well know, most organizations have, specific criteria around different things.
Yeah.
So we want to have conversations with them around that, so that we are adding in the components so that their team members do get their Con Ed hours for attending the training.
Right.
And that we can be acknowledging that and building on that for future trainings.
Okay. Awesome. Teachers. Yeah. Catherine said teachers convention. Absolutely. Get the teachers on board here. They, that was always one of my visions for, with Alberta Emergency Management Agency. We developed the basic emergency management course and the municipal elected officials course, and even a director of emergency management course. And like, what better people in the community to deliver that training than teachers and others in the area that have that really great educational and classroom background, especially now with COVID-19. Like, everybody has experience now with crisis leadership and crisis communications.
True.
Like, there is not going to be a lot of people who are not qualified to at least talk about leading in crisis. And so I think we've just, through this, we're building up capacity across the country, across the world, to deliver these types of courses where, normally we'd get people say, well, they're not an emergency manager, they're not a first responder, so how could they teach the basic emergency management course? Well, go through the train the trainer, take the course. It's not rocket science. You're just teaching terminology, sharing some stories, and giving people information. Like, it's that we have to empower our community to deliver these kinds of things, or we're not going to get anywhere. So I want to thank you very much for doing this today and for coming on here to explain a little bit more in depth about the program and the training. I learned a ton of stuff. So I really appreciate your time. Again, sarautism.ca. They can email you directly. What was your email again?
Shannon at autismcanada.org.
Okay, and that's Shanyn, Shanyn, because I would not have spelled it that way. Anything else you want to throw at us before we sign off? Got the Launch and Learn, October
I just want
24th.
to say, yeah, October
Yeah.
24th, mark it on your calendars. And thanks for having me, Brad. I really appreciate it. It's great to talk about the program and invite people to contact me and see how we can fit the needs of their communities and their organizations, and just really build some great conversations and some safer environments and better communities. And I just want to say thank you to all of our SAR teams and everyone who's been out there keeping people safe and responding. I know we've had a lot of people coming and telling me, the calls are up. People are exploring more because of COVID. There's a lot more exploring and adventuring, and that's great. But we also need to be able to recognize our volunteers that are keeping us safe and those community leaders that are trying to make a difference for us. So I want to say thank you to all of them.
Yes.
And I'm really looking forward to having those conversations and getting things rolling, because this is a great program for a lot of reasons. And I'm, as someone who comes from emergency services background, I'm invested in it because of it helps that community, but also my connections to autism and neurodiversities. It's close to my heart because that keeps people that I care about and communities that I care about safe.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be great. And hey, John, I'm glad you came. And thank you, Catherine, for your great points. I appreciate
thank you,
that.
Catherine. Thank you,
That
Jonathan.
was
Appreciate
awesome.
that. And we want to say thanks again to everyone who tuned in. This will be, if you only caught us halfway through, we'll be posting this on our Hazardscape YouTube channel, and I'll pass the link over to Shannon, so you'll be able to catch up on the whole show or rewatch it if you wanted to get a refresh on some of the things we said. So in closing, thanks for tuning in. Stay connected, and we will see you next week when we talk about Emergency Management Logistics Canada, a new directory that's coming out across the country. We'll be talking about that next week. So stay tuned. Stay connected.